Hi, Varun.
Hey, how are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Good. How's your afternoon been? Thank you.
Wait,
Hey, Bindu.
should I reduce? Hi, Bindu. Should I reduce the light? Damn it. Yeah, my office is because it's sunshine.
No, I think this is fine.
Sunshine state.
Can you move your is there a table in front of the light? Like, no, the other way. So the light is completely
On my face.
on your face, yeah.
You're
on mute, Bindu.
Let me see if I
There
can
you
go.
go. Hi.
Hey.
How
Hi,
are you?
Bindu.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, and
Should I move the direction? Let me see. 1 second.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if the light can fall on you,
on your
Sonal.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can just call me Varun. You don't have to call me Varunji. Bindu.
I know.
I was like, why is she?
Sometimes when I feel like I want to offend someone, I like bring it in.
Soften the blow.
No, it's just respect. Once in a while I feel respected.
Is this a better? Is this better?
I liked your previous thing. I don't know. Varun, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the light was better.
Yeah. Here it's much darker.
That's my original place. I just came on the other side where somebody else would be. Okay.
Yeah, if you can face the light, that'd be the best.
That's my original place. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hi, Renu. You're muted.
You're muted.
Hello.
Hey, Renu, how are you?
Good. Are you Varun?
Yes, I am.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Bindu.
Hi, Renu.
Hi, Sonal.
Hello. Sorry about that. Yeah. Hi, Renu.
Hello.
You're the star. I just want you to know that.
Oh my God, what did I do? I'm normally in big trouble. You mean
No, you have no idea. It's amazing that you're inspirational because when you come out with your story, you have no idea how much of inspiration you give to people. I have all my DV existing clients who are going to sign in and who are going to listen to you.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I said, you absolutely have to. There are some who are, there's one who is wanting to go back and, it took her 12 years to step out. And now she wants to go back, or she wants to give him one chance. And he's been crying and, oh my God. And I was like praying, you can't force.
Bindu had interviewed me just in, I think it was November.
Yeah.
At that time, my ex-husband was still alive, and I had the pleasure or displeasure or whatever you want to call it. God bless him. He died on Christmas Eve. And how I'll be happy to share that experience of how that you have all this anger that builds up you for 30 years. But God is great. He gave me the opportunity to have the last word.
Right.
Oh my God, you're amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I actually did his whole funeral for him, despite all the experiences that we went through. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make sure.
Sure, absolutely.
Extremely.
Where are you based? Are you in New Jersey?
I'm in LA.
Oh, you're in LA. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Is this is it a radio station or is it is it on a podcast?
It's on it's on podcast. I go Facebook Live, and then it's also on Zoom. So right now they're going to be attendees joining us. We'll have about 50 people join in, and then I go Facebook Live as well, so it'll go live on Facebook.
Wonderful. I think Sheena is joining us, Bindu.
Yes, she said she
motivated my daughter now. So
Oh, awesome.
Yes, the younger one.
Yeah, I'm going to go on mute just 1 minute if you don't mind.
Yeah, and thank you, Bindu, for for talking to Renu and getting her involved.
I mean, hey, Renu's she's been really amazing at sharing her story. So it's wonderful. And Renu, I don't know if this is even a topic you want to get into, but I was talking to Varun about just how even the dynamics with how it impacts children.
Oh, yes.
And given that Sheena is there, I don't know. That's your
No,
prerogative.
she's fine. She's fine talking about it. Yeah. It's very
I mean, if you want
to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
Because,
Absolutely.
and is your audience, is it Indian, mainstream?
It's Indian.
Okay.
Mainly
so
South
way
Asians.
I know. Yeah. South Asians. Okay.
Yeah. So I think the immigration piece will play in, of course, Renu, children, societal, all of those things.
Correct.
And I think no better person to say it than someone who's lived through it. So, yeah.
I wonder how many listeners are Punjabi.
Hey, we might as well air it all out, right?
It's very prevalent in the Punjabis. That's the issue. We like to pretend it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But
but it's interesting you said that, because one of my clients is Punjabi, and it's an infidelity case, and abuse, not physical abuse, but just generally. He was in love with his love of his life for 18 years, out of which 12 years he's married. Never told her, nobody knew till she found out. And then finally she walked out, and he still continues to say that, when we would go to Laguna Beach, this is where we would kiss. This is where we would sit and kiss. And she doesn't even, and she still came up to me and said, do you think I should give him one chance? My sass is saying that he'll be okay once we have a child. And now they have a child. So he also went ahead and had a child because the mother wanted it.
Of course, that's
and
the best
now they're fighting
Punjabis give. Punjabis always
now,
give that advice.
Yes, and now they're in a custody battle. So I'm dealing with one more thing right now. So I'm, you have no idea how. And I've told her.
That's a solution to any Punjabi problem. Bacha bana lo. Bas, khatam.
I think it's an Indian issue.
It's an Indian thing. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a kid.
You guys should watch
on
Netflix. There is a new series.
Don't talk to me about that show. I've been criticizing.
No. Of course, criticize only. But
Indian matchmaking.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh, that makes my blood boil.
Yeah, but the fact is, it still exists, right?
Yeah.
So from that point of view, what I'm saying is to watch and say that, look at this garbage.
I'm actually going to write about it. I watched it this past weekend, and I binged it all over Saturday, and now I'm sitting down and writing my thoughts about it.
I have one more.
I've been at battle. I've been at war on Facebook since weekend.
I've been reading.
I took a little snippet of one. She goes to this life coach, and the lady tells her about how women have to sacrifice. And it's like, and you must give up everything. I gave up everything for him, and I feel like giving up one chapati. What are you talking about? How can you say that?
Quick thing before we go live, so we have 2 minutes out. Can everybody repeat their name so I can pronounce it properly? Bindu, if you could just repeat your name.
Yes, Bindu Omen Fernandez.
Bindu Omen Fernandez. Got it.
Omen as in O-M-E-N.
Omen, got it. Perfect.
Yeah, Sonal Pujara Ladva.
Sonal Pujara Ladva. And Renu?
Easy one.
Renu Dhillon. Yeah. All right. Okay, cool.
Don't we have one more?
With
Kalpana.
Yeah, where is she? Oh. And then Sheena is your daughter, right, Renu?
Yeah, I think Sheena is just coming on through as listening.
Yeah, she's just attending.
Yeah, she's.
And how do I pronounce Kalpana's last name?
Oh, but that's a tough one.
No, I don't think
it's
One second, I'll just read it.
It's
Pedi Botla.
Yeah, Pedi Botla. She was on my show last week, and I just avoided using the last name.
I'm gonna say it once, and that's it. The first time I did this, I had one panelist whose name I could not pronounce his last name. So I just said Punacha, and I left the last name out. And I felt kind of awkward doing that. But this time I wanted to avoid it by preparing ahead of time, because I didn't ask him ahead of time. So I want to make sure I do it at this time. All right, so let's go live. I'm gonna broadcast, and we're live. Oh, Kalpana has joined in as well. Hey,
Hi.
Kalpana, welcome.
Oh, hey, Kalpana.
Sorry, it took me some time to find the...
Oh, no issues. You were right on
Hi,
time.
Kalpana.
Hi, how are you, Reina? Hi, everybody.
Good. How are you?
Good.
So I'm going to go really quickly live on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm getting messages saying they're waiting.
On Facebook? Okay.
No, Zoom.
Oh, Zoom we started, so now they've joined in already. So
Okay.
we have attendees join in already. Welcome everybody. If you guys could, all the audience, if you could type in where you guys are from. I want to see what cities, what states where we have here. So please type in the chat. There's a chat. Type in what cities you guys are from.
Let's see, participants. Okay.
And I'm going Facebook Live.
You're asking them to type in on Q&A or in the chat?
In the chat below.
Oh yeah, I have two people. Dublin. Michigan. Again, Michigan.
Wow, Michigan, Midwest.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Welcome.
Again, Michigan. 3 Michigan, 1 Dublin.
Yay. All right, we are live on Facebook as well. Fallbrook, California. Fantastic. Wow, we got so many people joining in. At least 3 from, yes, May Family Services has been one of our collaborators. They're based in Michigan and they've done a fantastic job. All right, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to What's Your Story? This is Conversations in Women's Abuse. This is your host, Dr. Varun Gandhi, Love and Abundance. I like starting every talk with that. So this show is an exploration of our world. We talk about issues pertaining to the South Asian community, but these issues are not limited to just us. They're shared across every community. The question I had was, how can we move the needle on these issues? One answer is through conversations, by talking about it, by learning about it, by reaching out to people who don't look like you, and having uncomfortable conversations. We call this the land of the free, but we don't really have freedom because we are bound by hate, by shame, by abuse, by rejection, by not taking control of our mind, and by our differences, amongst many other chains that bind us. And these are the issues we're talking about in What's Your Story? In the first 2 episodes, we discussed mental health and colorism in South Asian communities across the world. And some of our future topics include yoga appropriation, men's abuse, and immigrating to the US. On to today's conversation, women's abuse or domestic violence. So when South Asians immigrated to the US in the 1970s, they were passionately driven to achieve economic stability, you know, that American dream, and socialize the next generation to retain their cultural traditions. During these years, the immigrant community projected an impeccable public image by denying the existence of social problems, such as domestic violence, sexual assault, mental illness, racism, amongst many other. It was not until about the mid-2000s that through activism, these issues were brought to light. And that's not very long ago. We haven't had enough time for healing as a society. So every conversation we have, every message that's shared on social media, all of it helps in supporting our people. And that's why we are here today, supporting our people. So before we introduce our panelists, I would like to thank a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of sponsors, organizers. So first, I would like to thank our sponsors, Neeta Naturals. They're an Ayurvedic beauty and wellness brand that offers skincare products both for men and women. Their products are made with botanical, vegan, and organic ingredients and include facial oils, beard oil, masks, toners, natural perfumes, and colognes. And you can find Neeta Naturals on the Love Abundance store at loveabundancestore.com. I'd also like to thank our collaborators, Narika, Open Dialogues, Genius Kids, Miss Renu, Daya Houston, Sahas for Cause, the Indo-American Cultural Foundation in New Jersey, Sahara Cares, GOPIO New Jersey, India Health Camp of New Jersey, Joy of Sharing Foundation, Crown the Brown, India Association of Greater Charleston, South Asian Today, SEMA Network, May Family Services, and Siwa Foundation. And finally, I would like to thank the many, many supporters who have shared our posts all over Facebook and Instagram. Thank you all for making this happen. So a few quick announcements before we move on to our panelists. I want everyone to know that this is a safe space. There's no judgment. So please share your experiences or ask your questions without reservation. Of course, if you feel comfortable, there is a way to make your questions anonymous, or you could change your name, so please do that. But please ask your questions and ask them at any time. When you think about it, type it in the chat and it will be answered during the course of this discussion. So on to our panelists. First, we have Bindu Oman Fernandez. Bindu is the executive director at Narika, a domestic violence support and prevention nonprofit. Their organization offers free safety planning, counseling, legal and other resources, support groups, job programs, and wellness programs for anyone who has experienced domestic violence. She firmly believes that everyone can be part of the solution to end domestic violence and create safety, empowerment, and wellness for all. Welcome, Bindu.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So you have a particularly empowering story because you were first at Google and now you're at a nonprofit called Narika. So can you share your personal journey and how you were drawn to your current path?
Absolutely. Again, I'm so excited to be here. So my first, I would say it was pretty random or by chance that I started working at Google. It was my first job out of university. Got lucky, got into Google. It was my dream job. It felt like working at Disneyland every day, and it was amazing, for a lack of a better word. And then sometime, it was my early 20s, there was one work trip I remember being on, and I had a senior colleague of mine, and she decided to turn around and disclose her story of domestic violence to me. And I was in my early 20s. I remember looking at this woman who I had known for a couple of years and wondering like how she was staying, why she would not leave. She had the money to leave. She had the ability to leave. And yet she chose to stay. And so, you know, it started a conversation and a thought around why is it, I remember being so naive about things like why people stay and why people leave, and assuming things like money was the only reason why someone would stay in a relationship. So that planted the thought, and many years later, I started volunteering in the space. So I got trained in domestic violence, in sexual assault and human trafficking. And the plan was always just to volunteer. The plan was never, as our Indian parents tell us, to like stick with our well-paying jobs. Right. The intention was always to have my paid job and then volunteer in this space. Yeah. So I started volunteering. It started with 3 hours a week, moved on to 5 and 6 and 8. And with every story I heard, it was just very clear how nobody was exempt from this issue of domestic violence. And that is what stayed with me. Just the range of ages that we worked with, the range of socioeconomic levels, the range of genders, sexual orientation, like no matter who the person was, you somehow could not escape domestic violence in a way, or it happened to you. And so that kind of planted the burden to move into the space. And so end 2018 was when I kind of decided, hey, it's time to move. It's important that we do the work that we feel burdened to do when we have the energy and almost the privilege to be able to do that work. And so in 2019, I started working at Narika, and Narika is a culturally responsive organization that works in domestic violence, and it's been so enlightening for me, just to realize the additional complexities that our South Asian survivors face, and just to recognize it. I remember really not understanding it fully. I kind of thought, hey, well, all of us have the same needs if we experience domestic violence, but really to be fully aware and understanding and learn every day. I'm learning every single day how many more additional complexities there are, just from like gender norms to, there's just so many angles there. So that has brought me to where I am now, and I'm grateful to be here. A lot of my burden and our organization's burden is really how do we serve in a trauma responsive manner, in a manner that really puts our client front and center, really not to push our agenda onto people, but really to empower that person to say, what do you want for yourself? And sometimes it's the most wonderful thing anyone can ask. It's really, hey, what do you want for yourself? And do you even remember what you might want or know what you want, and really help someone through it? So it's been exciting to be a part of this journey, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Bindu. I know for sure that Narika is so blessed to have you.
Thanks.
So next panelist, we have Sonal Pujara Ladva. Sonal is a licensed psychotherapist and a licensed marriage and family therapist and mediator with a master's in clinical psychology, all culminating toward enhancing quality of life. She offers focused sessions to couples on the brink that are unsure of staying or leaving the relationship. Her areas of interest and practice are couples, intimate partner violence, cultural definitions of abuse, codependency, and love. Welcome, Sonal.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you very much. Really honored to be part of such a varied and a rich panel. Just happy to be here. And thank you, Bindu, for sharing what you did. It's amazing to see how in this field you have people from all walks of life. And to Bindu's point, the area of interest, or my reason for interest, was a little slightly different than Bindu's, because I was already given a platform of psychotherapy. So obviously I came across clients. So, although I've been part of corporate world, it was only in the world of psychotherapy where I saw live cases. And the more I saw, what really triggers to me is that I think, especially within the Indian context or Indian culture, I think our definition of abuse is very different. We don't even recognize it. And I think our families are breeding grounds. And I don't, by saying this, I don't mean to put down any family or the family values or the parents or the grandparents, because they really didn't know better. But more and more that I meet people, I see that people don't realize, because we're brought up, to Bindu's point when she says that, it's the most amazing question to be asked, what do you want? And I find that within the Indian society, when you ask particularly women, and I'm not saying men are not abused, but that's for a separate platform.
Sure.
We will discuss men's abuse, but because we're focusing on women, I'm saying, try asking an Indian woman what she wants, and she won't have an answer. She won't know most of the times. She'll say, oh, whatever my children want. Oh, whatever my husband wants. Oh, whatever my parents want. And no one's really, kind of free of that. We're brought up. So the whole cultural milieu that we have, for us, we have a premium on self-sacrifice, on sacrificing, and we look at it as a virtue, but we don't realize that when you constantly instill those values in your children, very often they grow up to sacrificing their own needs completely. It's like an adult version, when you tell your child what to share, to keep sharing, because sharing is a great virtue. So you tell your child, oh, you tell one, oh, don't worry, your brother or your brother wants it. Okay, baby, it's all right. I'll get you the chocolate later. Give it to your brother. She hands it over to her brother. She goes to school, and at school, she's doing a drawing and with a red crayon, and the kid next to her wants that red crayon. Guess what's going to happen? She badly wants that red crayon, but so habitual of giving what she wants, she hands over the red crayon. And so what happens is, my point is, the more and more I delve into this space, and I also do divorce mediation. So I have couples who come in front of me. And it's amazing to see the pattern as to all of us, we've been brought up pretty much with the same value system. And my point is that it's very important to kind of draw a boundary, or at least be cognizant, when you talk of sharing. I'm a student of Vedanta, and in fact, my teacher is in the audience right now. And Lord Krishna talks about sharing, obviously. But Krishna himself says that you can only pull somebody out of a well if you are out of the well. If you're also in the well, you're not going to be able to pull out the person. How are you going to pull out? So we forget our own cultural richness, and we just launch into this selflessness and sacrificing, sharing nature. And I think that's where the attention needs to be if we want to start early. Yeah, what Bindu is handling and Renu's story and what Kalpana will tell us is the aftermath, what happens when adults come to them, But my job more often than not, what I really, really like to do in my work is to tell my clients how to parent, how to become better parents. So it's almost like reparenting parents, and that's that's where I like to pay attention to. Of course, we'll hear more from Renu and Kalpana and more from Bindu, but that's where my attention is. So thank you so much.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our next panelist is Kalpana Pedibotla, who is an immigration attorney who has advocated for victims of violence throughout her life. She regularly provides pro bono consultations and services to several Bay Area domestic violence organizations like Maitri and Narika. Kalpana, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I know you're so passionate about helping women. So how did you get into that space?
Well, I think listening to Bindu, I guess I wanted to think about what sort of led me on this path. I actually think it starts with my own family, with my parents. When they came to the U.S. in the 60s, they came amidst the civil rights movement. And through that, I've experienced much of the great things that the U.S. has to offer. But I've also experienced many of its ills, being a visible minority at times and an invisible minority. We grew up in all parts of the United States and had many terrible things throughout that. But I realized many great friendships were formed, and there was also lots of understanding. But I realized for myself that if you have the ability, then it becomes a necessity to stand up for yourself and to stand up for our community and for those who have not yet found their voice. And so hopefully that's what I try to do in my law practice. I first came across the work of Narika actually before I became an attorney, and myself and a few other women those women have just gone on to do tremendous things in their career. We helped to form the first training of Narika, and I met the original founders who are also just amazing pioneers in this space. And then very shortly after I graduated from law school and came back to the Bay Area to work, very unfortunately, there was a human trafficking case that happened here where the trafficker was from where my family originates from in Andhra Pradesh. We knew him, actually. Many people in our community knew him. And it was a very huge case at the time. I was one of the very few attorneys of the Telugu background who could relate to the girls that had been brought here. And I was essentially drafted by the ACLU to step in and to support that cause at the time. And I think it just stuck with me. Throughout my career, I've dedicated a section of it towards pro bono because, like I said, I knew what it was like to grow up invisible. And I now also know what it's like to have a voice and be able to help and use it.
Thank you so much, Kalpana. Thank you for helping every day. And I know the contribution that you provide is that's definitely what's needed in our community. And our last panelist is Renu Dhillon. She's a strong advocate for personal empowerment of women and children. Through her own personal experience of being a victim of emotional and physical abuse, today, she shares her strong voice to build the confidence of women, advocating that life gives everyone a chance to live again. She has co-authored a book sharing her own journey of overcoming domestic violence. Renu, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all. It's wonderful to listen to all the lovely ladies, and of course you, Dr. Varun. And what I would like to begin by saying is, where was Kalpana, Bindu, and Sonal when I needed you? Sure. So what's my story, and why am I so vocal about it? Because a lot of people will tell me you shouldn't be vocal. You don't need to tell everyone your story. Leave it alone. And I don't believe that that's the way things get solved. Because for me, every time I speak, it's my own self-therapy as well. It's kind of like I'm doing my own. I'm going to a psychiatrist myself when I talk about things and I vocalize them. So, I was raised in Kenya with a very loving family, no difference between boys and girls at all. And, till now, my parents, even after 63 years, God bless them, they're still in love. And I still wonder how people can stay in love after 63 years. I couldn't handle 1 year of it. And, raised always to think that boys and girls are equal, had great school, but I grew up with very overprotective parents. So the concept from ages, from 0 to 10, it was okay to play with boys until 12. And then from 12 to 22, boys were a big no-no. You don't even talk about boys. And then the whole focus is education. And then the entertainment was going to Bollywood movies, to the drive-in cinema. So what do? You grow up thinking that, you're going to have a perfect life. You're doing great at school. Honor student at college. And now you're going to get this perfect marriage. I mean, couldn't fall in love, and you're going to have this perfect family. And I'd already counted how many kids I was going to have, before I had them. So for me, everything was going really well. But I was, I had met someone that I really wanted to get married to in Kenya, but unfortunately it didn't work out between the families. So my dad's wish and dream was to come to America to live the American dream, which may I voice this? Mr. Trump, you've ruined my dream today. But anyway, came here to live the American dream. Had a kind of an arranged introduction. I wouldn't call it a love marriage. I wouldn't call it an arranged marriage. I met him. I think probably, out of maybe rebound, I just didn't want to stay in Kenya anymore. I said yes, and I thought the furthest I could be away would be America, and it sounded very tempting. Landed here, and this gentleman, my ex-husband, God bless him, he's no more now, but he waited 2 years for me to say yes. I mean, that's how obsessed he was with me, through a simple, silly video that he had seen me doing a Bhangra dance. So I was convinced that this man was crazy about me, and I was going to have this perfect life. Well, I had a very rude awakening, because I landed here to find out that he was already married. And that was wife number one. Over the 4 years, I realized and found out that there were 3 more before me. So that was a rude awakening. But as Sonal has said, Bindu and Kalpana have mentioned, we grow up you grow up in this culture where you're told, don't ruin your family's reputation. This is your destiny. And my mom is from old school. I mean, I don't know which astrologer my mom did not spare, to check whether I was going to have this perfect life. So my advice to all the women who are listening today is always go with your instinct and your first gut feel. And the day I landed in this country, and within the first 2 hours of me being here, the third wife called for her check. I answered the phone, and that's when I realized there was a third wife. And then afterwards I realized there was a second one, and then they all started to multiply everywhere. I should have left. And I did. I packed my bags and I walked to the door to leave. And then, of course, the typical questions that come to your head: what are people going to say? What is the community going to say? I was the first one who got married. And then, of course, the husband, all the promises. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Forgive me. This will never happen again. Well, guess what? It went from lies, deceitfulness, to abuse. And, anyone that would have known me growing up, and I know I have some friends listening into the show, I was a very boisterous, you can probably tell, a very boisterous, very naughty child, always in trouble, and spoke my mind. I got myself into a lot of trouble all the time because of my big mouth. And suddenly, in the 4.5 years I was married to this person, I lost everything that I was. I became scared. I was I lived in fear all the time of my life. I lived in fear that even if I made too much salt in the dal, I would get the worst slap across my face. I feared everything. I had my first child who was a daughter, and I was blamed. Why did you have a daughter? And believe it or not, my in-laws were genetic scientists. You would think, if anything, they'd have the brains to understand where the gender is chosen. And the story goes on, and there are many horrific experiences. And what I can tell you is, today, after 30 years, 3 broken noses, thrown down a second floor where I delivered my second child, who's actually logged in listening to us today. So love you, Sheena. Thanks for supporting me. I would tell you that nobody would have thought that I was going to recover. But ladies, you have to take that step. Stop thinking this is your destiny. Stop having astrologers decide that this is it. This is for you. Life abhi tera pati hai. These are your kids. Give up everything for your kids. And I had the friends give the worst advice. Don't go to your friends. Go to professionals. My friends would say, you have everything. You live in a beautiful house. You have cars. So chalo ek do baar usne maar, he's give you a thappar. It's not a big deal. Get over it. How can you get over it? That thappar leads to more thappars. And then you don't realize the effect it's having on your children. Your children are witness to this. My older daughter has had to call 911 at the age of 3 several times. Why would a 3-year-old need to do that? So I'm here to share my journey, to tell everybody that it's not the end of the world. And anyone tells you that one husband, that's it, your life is over, forget it, girls. Have as many as you like until you get the right one. Or don't have a husband. You don't have to have a husband. Life is not about having a husband. Life is about yourself and about, if you don't love and respect who you are, nobody else is going to. So in actual fact, he left me. So thank you. I'm so glad he took the step to leave me, because I didn't have the courage to do that. And one of the biggest things that held me back was the immigration. I had a green card. So that threat was held over me all the time, that if you leave, if you give me a divorce, our children are American, I'm going to kick you out. I'm not going to get you your green card. And then you're never going to see your kids again. And that's the reason why I stayed in this marriage until he left. And I thank myself. I celebrate that. It was on Thanksgiving, and I say thank you every Thanksgiving, because that was what I call a slow death to an incredible beginning. So for me, divorce is a slow death to an incredible beginning. And I encourage every woman out there that even if you've been married 1 day, 20 years, 30 years, 15 hours, if you don't get the respect that you deserve, you know what? Time to move on, ladies. Time to move on. They don't change. He never changed in 30 years, 33 years. God bless him. He died on Christmas Day. He was still the same man. He didn't change. He didn't change. So yeah. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to make sure I can make even a difference in one woman today. I've done my job.
I'm glad you brought up that women don't have to marry, and that even that is an option, that they don't have to marry, because that Indian matchmaking just came out, right?
We won't even talk about that one, Varun. No, seriously. And I'll be honest with you. I tell my own daughter, as women, we want to have children, right? It's motherhood. And I tell her, don't go find me a husband, a son-in-law, just so that you want to have a child. Have the child independently. I'll fully support you. But don't bring the wrong man in the house, because I can't deal with that anymore. We're done. Yeah. So.
All right. Wow. So on that note, that actually is a perfect kind of segue into our first question. I want to talk about what the various forms of abuse are, because domestic violence is not just physical. Physical is the one that's the most in your face, the most unmistakable form of abuse. But I want to talk about what are the subtle forms, like the other forms that happen maybe more often than the physical, but are not really talked about. So Bindu, if you want to kind of start with that.
Sure. Yeah, I think, there is a textbook definition of domestic violence, and it speaks to really control and power and the misuse of it and the ongoing frequent nature of it. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to understand, to your point, Varun, and to everything we're all speaking about, that it isn't just physical. Of course, physical abuse is a form of abuse, but so is verbal, and so is financial and immigration and so on. And when I think about, and I have some examples on, even with things like physical abuse, there are certain versions of it that really don't feel like they're abuse. And a simple example might be your partner threatening to harm themselves, or rather than threatening you, or punching the wall next to you while you're standing like centimeters away. And these may again not seem like, well, I don't have a bruise, is that really abuse? But yes, it is intimidation, it is fear. It creates a sense of, well, I have my place here, and it's not above the other person or next to the person, but below the person. And I think those are important things to recognize, that when there's an ongoing intimidation and fear and threat, that contributes to abuse. Of course, verbal insults, demeaning you, really just wearing away at your self-worth, and it's probably one of the first things someone who causes harm will do, is really wear away at your self-worth and your self-love and your self-confidence. And really, that's one of the best ways to keep you in an abusive relationship, because now you don't think there is a sense of doing something outside of this person. Isolation is something that plays a huge role. It really contributes to abuse, where systematically, and I think it works much easier when you're an immigrant in the US or away from your friends and family, that if your abuser or the person harming you isolates you and says things like, I don't like your family, we don't need to like hang out with them anymore, I don't like your friends, like stay at home, why can't we just be together? Understand all of those as places of just creating this structure that allows for abuse to fester and continue. Financial abuse, we've had so many cases of people we work with where the person may be a VP at a big company, but she has never seen her financial account. She has never had access. She has to go and ask her husband every week for, hey, can I have a stipend of $50? And you have to submit receipts to your partner now. And you have to explain your mileage and why you went and where you went. And those are all things that really kind of contribute to this notion of control and power, really, right? And the abuse and the misuse of it. I think children play a huge role, especially with our immigrant clients. We see a lot of cases where the children are US citizens, the parent, the person surviving, experiencing domestic violence is not.
Uh-oh, Bindu. Uh-oh.
I think her internet's frozen.
Internet's frozen, yep.
Can you guys hear me?
There you are.
Oh,
hey.
Okay. I'll wrap up. I think the internet gods are telling me to stop talking. But yes, immigration abuse. I mean, Kalpana is here to talk a lot more about immigration abuse. But I think one last one I want to bring out is just technology abuse. A lot of people that we work with have South Asians are great at tech, and well, that's going to be used for abuse as well. And so you will see that many of the people we work with, their phones are tapped, their cars are tapped, their laptops are tapped, and therefore the person causing harm is always one step ahead. They always know that the person they're harming is going to a counselor, is going to a therapist, is going to an attorney, etc. And so I think these are all ways that people exert control and power over other people. And it's just important to recognize it for what it is and really think about ways that how we may play a role in those forms of abuse and so on. And I'm sure, but yeah.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize that technological abuse could be one of them until recently, until I read about it and I learned about it. I would do like abuse based on technological, like look at messages, and because I was insecure in that relationship, so I would look through and make sure, like, control a little bit. Not all of it, wasn't monitoring the car and where she drove or anything, but messages on the phone at least. But yeah, I didn't realize it until recently. So we're talking about the legal kind of the law behind this. I want to bring Kalpana in right here. Kalpana, can you talk about the legal framework of domestic violence?
Sure. I think maybe the first part we'll start with is just how we treat these issues through the criminal legal system. And I think this is important for people to have an understanding, because certainly one of the things I hear over and over is this blaming of the victim or the survivor, that you're responsible for me going to jail, you put me in jail, how could you do this to me, right? So there's constant notion, and it's first important to understand that in in the laws in the United States that when a perpetrator of domestic violence is prosecuted, it's the state that is prosecuting that person. It is not the survivor that's prosecuting, it's the state. And well, why is it the state? It's because we've determined as a society that even if something's happening in a home, in the privacy of somebody's homes, that that's still a crime that not only impacts that individual that they're harming, but impacts potentially their children if they're present. It impacts our communities, our schools. It goes well beyond. It potentially creates additional safety concerns. So we have determined that domestic violence is a punishable crime, and that means the state is the one who's going to prosecute the perpetrator. And it's very important for us to acknowledge that small distinction, I think, as a community, because this notion like, oh, you went to America and then you put them in jail, all this kind of blaming and somehow becoming all of a sudden too American. No, it's not the person that was being harmed that put that person in jail. It's their own actions that cause a situation where they should go to jail. So that's something I want to point out. I also want to just discuss, when a police officer comes to a call, if there's a neighbor calling or even the victim of domestic violence is making that phone call, the police has some responsibilities, and one of those responsibilities may be to separate the partners, maybe to send the accused abuser out of the house as a safety. And they should be issuing something called an emergency protective order. That is how it's supposed to work. It doesn't always work so perfectly, but that's something that it should be happening. And if anybody's listening or knows somebody that's in these circumstances, it's important for them to know that they have rights when the police get there, including requesting the police officer to talk with them separately, because sometimes that doesn't happening, or to demand somebody who can potentially translate for them, or just to get the police officer's card when they get there and to follow up later, and with the help of organizations like NARICA. But the first framing is the criminal justice system. It's the state that prosecutes the perpetrator.
So we have a question, so let's actually go to that because it's appropriate right now. Is it legal for the victim to audio/video record an instance without consent of the abuser?
So I think this gets to the concern as to whether something like that can be admitted in court. And so, you can still audio and video record them as a means to protect yourself. Whether that would ultimately be admissible in a criminal court, I think, is a different question, one that I'm not prepared to answer because there's various considerations around them. But for immigration law, which is what my expertise is, we will absolutely take that and transcribe it and include it as part of the documentation that's used to support somebody's immigration case. There are these independent vehicles for people to seek immigration relief if they've been the victims of domestic violence.
So then an abuser can, I guess a follow-up question is, can the abuser use audio record without consent? And that's in the
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the question was coming as to whether as somebody who is being abused, whether they can record that abuse as it's happening, which actually I've had a client do exactly that. And then she spoke into the microphone as she was being abused and saying, "Why are you hitting me? Why are you hitting me?" And we took that and transcribed it into the to support her. But I think you're asking a different question as to whether somebody may be invading their privacy and potentially acting criminally against as a further form of abuse. And yes, that could be a further form of abuse.
Okay. There's a few more questions. So what about when the police supports the abuser, when the abuser has bribed the police?
So I don't believe bribery happens that commonly. I with the Fremont Police Department as well as the chief of police, who is actually supportive of these types of cases, as well as the captain. Police should mention that there is something called a COPS advocate that's from SAVE, which is another domestic violence organization, where there's an actual advocate that sits in the police department. It's pretty unusual that you would have a situation of bribery. It's not one that I've personally have come across. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I certainly haven't come across that. I think that you can typically trust your police officers. You should stand up to somebody who's telling you the police won't help you. The police are in my pocket. I know the police. They're going to come and deport you. Any types of framing that the police is going to come to hurt you, those notions need to be dispelled right here and now, because the police can actually be supportive and protect you in those circumstances.
There's one more question. What happens, this might be way too specific, but let's just ask it. What happens if the police department does not send all documents to the district attorney? What actions can the victim take to file the case in criminal court?
Right. So again, it's not that they can file the case, but what you can do is you can work with the great organizations like NARICA, and then I did mention SAVE earlier, and there's others who can help you as victims advocates to help your case to be seen by the DA's office. So they can help you ensure, at least, make sure you get access to the police report, for one. You can contact the district attorney's office and saying this is what happened, and if they felt that police action was inadequate, I would encourage them through the support of a DV organization to help them in raising a complaint. And I think it's better for me to let Bindu speak to what they do. I do know that organizations I've worked with around the Bay Area have varying levels of involvement with the police departments or the DA's office, and will get involved to support the victim.
Yeah, go ahead, Bindu.
And yes, I think I'll just tag and say that as an organization, we do know some of our city police departments. And so depending on which city the person is in, we're happy to, we'll support a person no matter where they are. But depending on our involvement with the police department, we can always support how you navigate those interactions and how to present your best case. Because what we have seen many times is people are overwhelmed by the idea, which is understandable, overwhelmed with the idea of speaking with law enforcement, especially as an immigrant, especially as someone who may not have a green card or citizenship. And you're also experiencing trauma. Why would you know the best things to say or remember all of it? Like all of that's a flawed concept of why people would be their best selves while speaking with law enforcement or anybody. And so we, as an organization, we can always support them with how to present their best case, either for a custody arrangement or restraining order or with law enforcement, etc. So that's stuff we can always support with.
Great. So, and for Kalpana, another law question. What are some of the laws that help to protect immigrant women in particular?
Sure. So the laws that protect immigrant women arise out of the Violence Against Women's Act. The first set of laws came about to protect the spouses of U.S. citizens and permanent residents. So if somebody was married to a U.S. citizen and a permanent resident, the VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, does provide an independent pathway towards permanent resident for that. They don't have to live under this threat of, I can take away your green card, I don't have to sponsor your green card. Or some people have what's called a conditional green card, and they have to remove the condition within a set period of time, and the abusive partner is threatening that they won't participate or protect or help them with that. And there's absolutely ways in that example to seek a waiver from their participation. But Violence Against Women's Act, the starting point, there is an independent pathway towards women who are married to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. They can get their own green card. We recognized that law, though, was inadequate because there are also spouses of people who are on non-immigrant visas, like H-1Bs, L-1s, to name a few. And they were not protected by that section of the Violence Against Women's Act. So then it was amended, and there became now a pathway for women in those circumstances. That's known as the U visa. Some people may have heard about that before, that the U visa provides for protections of certain crimes. In particular, it includes domestic violence. The distinction here is that the U visa relates to cooperation with law enforcement. But one thing I want to mention, and it's important to understand and have somebody talk to an immigration lawyer or an immigration advocate, is that it's not necessary. You do not actually have to file a police complaint if you're able to have an adequate hearing in a family court, which is a civil proceeding, meaning there's no criminal prosecution, but it's a civil proceeding, and you're seeking to have a restraining order for self-protection. But as part of that, there is a methodology to actually seek the assistance of the family court judge to support a U visa. Again, some of these things are not adequate, but there's a step in the right direction. When we meet with clients, we try to give them basically several different strategies to try to get out of that violent household. And the number one is get out of the violent household. We can find an immigration pathway that will work. There's also a work station that's now been made available for victims of crime like domestic violence. This is known as the VAWA EAD. This is different for those listeners who are kind of listening in. This is different from the H-4 EAD. Even H-4s who get this employment authorization document, but it's called a VAWA EAD. And again, you do not have to have filed a police report. You can document the abuse through like a and it's credible. And that's again something like the DV organizations and others can help bring out your story and help you be able to support you in that type of case. So the key point is, whether you're married to a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, an H-1B visa holder, there are a few different pathways to protect your rights. Do not believe that you will get deported, and if that's the reason that's holding you back, reach out to us because we can figure out some other way to find immigration status for you, or at least protections through the immigration laws.
Wow, that's really good to know. So you are deported is just an empty threat, or you can be deported.
Yeah, I mean, well, not that I as an immigration advocate, I actually don't typically advocate for deportation, since that's not really in line with what the mission of our law firm. But somebody who was convicted of domestic violence actually can be deported.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And so what are, let's ask this one for Renu. Why do women not report their abuse?
So I've actually been reading a lot of the comments in the chat window as well. And why don't women report abuse? Well, I did. In my case, I did. And at the time that I was abused, that time, I think the laws have changed. I'm not an attorney, but I know at that time you could withdraw your case, which is what my parents made me do every single time. Now I think when you report somebody in, they get thrown in, and I wish that had happened at that time. I have been reading the comments, and I will tell you that the reason why women don't report abuse is, first of all, the fear. If you have a threat, the emotional threat, financial threat, the biggest concern always is, first, the fear of the unknown. Where am I going to go?
Right.
That's one, always the fear of the unknown. Then if you have the financial abuse, so I had all four, whatever you announced today. We didn't have technology at the time, but we had pagers. So, but I had to track every move of mine, whatever I did. Even I went to a party, he would stand on the other side of the room and he wanted to know why I smiled, why did I laugh? It was a nightmare. I didn't want to do anything with this person. And so the emotional abuse gets to you because you become very weak. The financial abuse because you have no money. The physical abuse, again, you're weak. Sometimes you're so bruised you can't even go out and tell people. And the mental abuse, it becomes torture because you keep hearing there's something wrong with you. So in my case, my ex-husband was openly cheating, and that too with an employee of mine. And every time I would question it, he would say it was just all in your imagination. So I was always convinced, okay, give me another chance. It's your imagination. What's wrong with you? You know, you're old fashioned. You came from Kenya. You were not raised right. I mean, all kinds of things are thrown at you. So you are scared of reporting because the big fear is if you have kids, you won't see your children, you won't have money, and you can't rely on friends. So I do want to say that reading through all these comments, you know, people are making comments about the cops. I had the great support of the cops. It was my fault that I didn't press charges. The cops kept telling me, they told me from day one, this man's not going to change. You need to press charges. And I didn't. So that was my fault. My advice is, don't talk to friends. Don't sit there and wait for cops to do your paperwork. We're all very capable women. Call professionals. Right. Never trust a friend. I did that. And guess what? The friend told him exactly what I was going to do. Don't trust friends. Pick up the phone, call a professional, get the expert help. Get an attorney to advise you what your rights are. Call Narika, call a support, somebody that can advise you what your steps are and put you in touch with the right people. And go for help. Go for professional help. I'm very proud to say I went for therapy, and I took my children too, because you need the help. You need all the strength you need to get out of this relationship. And your friends cannot do it for you. They're just going to give you really bad advice, or they're going to listen to you, and then they're going to go home and continue with their life, and you're going to be left with yours, and you haven't done anything. So you're accountable for everything that happens in your life. Stop playing victim. Poor me. My in-laws did this to me. My husband did. No, it's you. You're allowing it to happen. Pull the reins, get them into your hand, and go do what you need to do to sort your life out. So if you think the cops are not doing it for you, then you know what? Take the next step. If you think that your paperwork is not going to be done, you go do your paperwork. Right. Get it done. Why are you relying on other people? We're very capable women. And we need to get off this whole old-fashioned ideas that we are here to sacrifice our lives for our husbands. We're not here to sacrifice for anybody. You have to live for yourself, and you have to begin by what's called self-realization. You need to love yourself first. And when you love yourself and you respect who you are, you'll be able to take all the steps you need without cops, without anybody. You will do the right thing.
Right. So there's a question in the audience. Is an abuser born that way, or does he become one over time? And kind of added to that is these behaviors in a way are modeled to us. So where do these models exist?
So I will really quickly answer that, and then I think Sonal will be the best person for that. But my ex-husband grew up in an abused family. His mother was abused all her life. And so for him, it was perfectly normal. Giving a thappar was routine. That was a routine. I didn't like your dal, smack, make another dal. Whereas I didn't grow up with that, so I'm sure there's some connection there, but I'm not an expert to answer that. So I think over to Sonal.
Sonal.
Thank you. Thanks, Renu. That was really very courageous. And I was almost shuddering listening to your story. To the question about whether abusers are born or are they brought up. As far as the born part goes, they fall into a category of personality disorders or psychotic disorders. But that's not really common frame. So I don't want it to seem as if, the mental health, it becomes like a garbage bag where if you don't understand, you say, oh, he's mental. So this is the case. That's also what happens many times, growing up, you hear to say that, oh, mentally he's just disturbed. So don't worry, he'll get over. This is situational. More often than not, to Renu's point about being modeled, we see that abusers, and when I say, or rather survivors or the / victims, they come from families where there is abuse that happens, which is very obvious because that's what is modeled. But the other subtle parts are one of the two parents are also dominating. So you either have a dominating father, and more so for our culture, because we come from a very male-dominated, paternalistic kind of a society where, the man has the last word. And so that's why what happens is that I keep saying that it's very important to be very conscious when you are talking in front of your children, because they may not learn what you say, but they definitely learn from what you're doing. So they learn from what they see rather than what you say. One common example that I always keep giving is on every cigarette pack, it says cigarette smoking is injurious to health. And every smoker reads that. How many of them really follow? So the point being that it's not only the written word or what you teach and what you say, but what you actually model. So yes, most of the stuff that happens because it's been modeled and you don't realize it, because that's how our families have been, especially from our Asian culture. That's how we are, where women are told that, you're defined by your existence is defined by the relationships that you have, especially for women. So to Renu's point, if you don't have a husband, or in the US at an appropriate time, if you don't have a boyfriend, people will start thinking something's wrong. Yeah. Doesn't have someone, but not realizing that, you can be on your own. And once again, just a disclaimer, when I'm talking on this platform, no way am I bashing husbands. No way am I bashing parents. And I'm not saying that please don't get married and a woman can only do everything all alone and all that. With good amount of support, interdependence, but healthy interdependence. So the emphasis on healthy interdependence, I depend on my husband depends on me, my children depend on me. That's healthy interdependence. Whereas what happens with us is growing up, the way we model, one other cue to take is that a lot of times in our culture, we have people who are constantly put to shame. There's humiliation, there's anger. And more so, male anger is socially acceptable. See, because men are not allowed to feel hurt. We say, what a sissy you are. Why are you crying? Don't cry, stupid. But if that same boy rages and is angry and all that, then you'll say, oh, macho man, Sylvester Stallone or Amitabh Bachchan, angry old man or angry young man. So what I'm saying is it's part of modeling. That's exactly what happens because your child learns. So when you constantly shame people, you humiliate them, the child internalizes that. And more often than not, you end up selecting partners that are like that. You become your parents in your relationship. And we have to be very cognizant about it. And in our age, in this day and age, when we have so much access to internet and information, I would recommend everybody on this audience to please go and do some reading on what happens on the whys and the whats, because this panel is not going to be able to, deliver the entire package. But this is very important as to what you talk, I had a 2-year-old, I had a client who brought in her 1-year-old who during the session, she started sobbing and crying. And the moment she started sobbing and crying, her 1-year-old was so disturbed in the crib. And the point I'm trying to make is that the child was catching on to what was happening to the mother in session. After that, I've never allowed children in my session, but she didn't have babysitting facility when she came for a session. So I had to kind of allow that. So what happens is abuse within and I keep stressing this point about Indians and Asians because we're talking to a panel like that. But it's very different from that in the Western sphere. We're taught to tolerate. Also the other thing is tolerate, ek thappad mara. I often tell people, please go and watch the movie Thappad, which Tapsi Pannu, I recommend that. It's only about one slap. And there are many people who came around and said that, what the hell? It was just one slap, yeah? She didn't have to walk out with just one slap. But that was the beginning. And the point I was making is that, yes, you have to be very, very conscious and very careful. So yes, the abusers are not really born, but every parent actually contributes to how the child shaped up to be an abuser. And it can be the either way also. Overprotective parents is another cue. When you're constantly overprotected, where the parents are coming, rescuing the child, if you don't let your child fall, if you don't let your child experience some amount and get up on their own, that child is not going to learn. And that's not how life is. So even these children, when they go out in life and they don't get what they want, then they turn it around. So there are times when I say this, that many a times it's not conscious. So when an abuser is doing it, yes, one part is that they're consciously doing it. But a lot of it comes because they insidiously learn. So if you are constantly getting shamed, humiliated, those are cues. You don't necessarily have to get beaten. Please don't wait till then. That's my point. Please don't wait that somebody will come with a chabuk and only then, oh, I don't have a bruise. How do I go to a cop? Yeah, but think about it for yourself. Think what is it that you're communicating to your child? Because your child is either going to grow up to be a perpetrator or your child is going to be the victim in the relationship. One of the two roles your child will pick up. So is that the legacy you want to leave with your children? So
Hey, really quick, I know Kalpana has to leave. Yeah. So Kalpana, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad you were here and you were able to share the legal aspect.
Oh, I wish you had stayed longer.
Sure. If I'm still on, I thought I'd share a couple things before hanging up. Thank you again for having me. And Renu, I appreciate your story. It's so courageous. I'm always humbled to hear you and others who decide to speak up for themselves. One of the things that happened very early on when I was taking some pro bono cases for another DV organization, Maitri, I represented a young woman in family court, and remarkably, the first came to her hearing to provide testimony to support her. And I just remember the image that day because these two ladies were there, and very unfortunately, like Sonal is describing, the abusive husband had been supported all along by his mother, who kept making excuses for her son's behavior. But it was undeniable when her two daughter-in-laws essentially got together and bonded, and the first wife supported the second wife. I was completely amazed by that, and it still sticks with me today. I want to just say a couple things because I was reading some of the chats. There's a community of support out there, and if you're not sure what to do, there's great organizations that can help you. As a lawyer, she's just trying to throw her in jail. My goal is definitely to see if there's solutions I can help first with the victim of abuse and find a pathway for them. There is an advantage in that of using our U.S. legal system, and that is the fact that the court can actually order the abuser to anger management courses, and that can be a significant turning point for that person who has been maybe coddled by their families, and their abuse was allowed to grow because they were never held accountable, and anger management is a way to do that. And in terms of accountability, I will say this. I do think there are significant examples from our own community where the sentences have been too light. And if somebody's looking for where they might spend some of their advocacy efforts, I think this is one, because I do think that domestic violence does not always get prosecuted to its fullest and to the degree that it deserves to be. And I think that's an area that we can continue to improve upon. And I know that several people were writing in about worries about the police. As many police or agencies has a way for you to follow up with them, including through that COPS advocate. So please don't lose hope just because you had a single beat officer who perhaps did not pay attention to your needs. The entire system's not corrupt, and I would hope that you would still pursue your rights. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you so much for joining in. And all right, so what can the community do to support ending violence against women? Bindu?
I would say, I want to echo what other people have been saying, which is if we start with ourselves, it's important to really just know your rights, know what is allowed and within the US as an employee, as a spouse, just understand your rights. Read up on immigration laws, read up on family laws. Like, these are important things to recognize. Simple gestures like knowing where your documents are. It could be your passport. It could be your visa status. It could be just access to your bank account. Many of the people we work with will bring up conversations like, I don't want to start that conversation. It's going to start into an argument and I don't want to argue with him. And therefore, I'm not going to ask for access to the bank accounts anymore. But really, understand that it comes back to hurt you, perhaps. And so really to take the time to assess and understand and gather all this information just in your life and your relationship and so on. So I'd start with that. I'd say everything Sonal and everyone else was talking about, really just the gender socialization, recognizing that within ourselves and each other. I remember I've been in the corporate world my entire life, and I mean, the first half of my life, and making these observations, like how women were always asked to take notes, and women were, it was the woman employee that was asked to cut the birthday cake. And really, there's so many subtle variations of things we all do and support in this kind of microaggression space, which eventually can contribute to something larger, and just really leave subtle messages about roles in society. And so I think it's important for us to really look at what are things we do. When you look at a woman leader, are you observing what she's wearing, or are you listening to the words she's saying? And hey, all of us are part of the problem too. We're all contributing to the problem and the solution sometimes. So it's just important to recognize that and really start naming and creating awareness around it. And I'd say self-care. Focus on everyone. A lot of people have been speaking to this as well. Really focus on yourself and the healthy interdependence that Sonal was talking about. It's important to not lose your identity in a relationship. It's easier said than done, of course, but really to think about, what do I have separate habits and hobbies and friend circles that are different from this relationship? And what do I do to nurture myself and take care of myself in the process, and not really build into this world of hey, I will burn my candle in order to provide light for others, but really think about how you take care of yourself first. And the last thing I'll say is just think it's also important to really, it goes back to looking at ourselves in the mirror about what is it we do with the power we have. As I said before, domestic violence is about power and control. And as I do this work, I realize how much power we all have in various parts of our lives. And it's important to really recognize what is it we do with the power we have. And so if you are an employer, if you are a parent, whatever places you show up in a position of power, if we're misusing our power, again, we're contributing to the problem. So I just think it's important that we look at our place in the problem, and with knowing our place in terms of how we take care of ourselves and others, we're able to kind of support and reduce instances of violence and abuse.
Great. Yeah, I love that. I love how you brought up, how we can focus on ourselves to improve ourselves so that we can put a better version of ourselves outside. Renu, is there something you would like to add on to this? What can the community do to support ending violence against women?
So I think the first thing, if we begin as parents, I think we need to raise our children differently. We need to raise our sons to respect women. We need to raise our daughters to understand that they're not going to be second best in the relationship, and not to settle for second best, and stop trying to paint a rosy picture. As Sonal mentioned, the parents are so overprotective. I see this at our schools, in our preschools, where parents, silly things, ridiculous things which are being shown on this Indian matrimonial show as well. For example, simple example, don't take my daughter out in the sun because she'll get dark. Well, hello, we are meant to be dark, folks. We are Indian. We're meant to be dark. And why aren't you not going to let the child go out and play? Right. Why? Because you fear she may not get married? How has colorism got to do with anything? So it's just, we have, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I'm very proud to be Indian because we do have some good qualities, but we also have some pretty pathetic mindsets which I don't know where they've come from. Whether it's not cultural, it's not religious, it's just something we've made up. And so let's raise our children to be resilient. Let's raise especially our women, as we've grown up, all you hear, right? I'll give an example. People ask me, why didn't you leave him right from day one? I didn't, because I thought to myself, my parents just had this very expensive, big fat Indian wedding. How do I leave in a week? And then my brother was not married, my sister was not married, what's going to happen? We're talking 33 years ago. That time people judged you, right? The older one is divorced. That means the whole khandan is like that. So guess what? I stuck around in this marriage for 4 years, only to have my brother marry an American, and he's very happily married. So he didn't end up marrying an Indian. And my sister ended up marrying a Muslim, and she let me marry somebody else now. So why I stuck around for 4 years for the benefit of the family? No idea. Then the other bad advice I was given is have another child. I'm very happy. I had 2 beautiful daughters. Have another child. Sab kuch theek ho jayega. Hello, friends. No, you only give him more reason to go out and entertain himself because you're busy with the child at home. So that's not a solution. Third, stop putting pressure on women that there is age by which they have to get married. Because then out of desperation, what do? We go marry, we settle for the second best. There's no age. Women are equal to men. And I always say, actually, I think we're a little bit more superior because after all, the higher power gave us childbirth. So he granted us the right to have children, which means we're stronger. So why aren't So what I'm saying is that women, you are strong. You have to find the strength within yourself, and you don't have to be second best. One of the best books I read when I was going through my divorce was that men are just desserts. And I'm not bashing men, but I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is we make our husband or that male partner our main, everything is around him. So what do women do? They give up their friends, they give up all the movies they like because he wants to watch that show, he wants to do this, he wants to do that. And guess what, friends? When he leaves you, you have nobody around you because he has his whole social circle because he never gave up his golf, he never gave up his drinking, he never gave up his parents. But what did he do with you? He controlled your entire life. So when you are left alone, you are alone. So learn to live alone. It's okay to be alone. And learn to self-respect yourself. And yes, as Sonal said, you don't have to wait for that thappar to leave him. There's all kinds of abuse out there, all kinds of abuse. And if you're not happy, why would you want to live in a miserable relationship? It's not the end of the world. It's move on, just move on. So I really think the change has to come from home. We have to educate and change our way of raising children, and then our children will then be the better parent, and hopefully we'll make some change in that way. And I think we need to be more forgiving when somebody comes to you and they need help. We need to have something called privacy. You don't have to go gossip about it, because that's what killed me. I had planned my whole divorce immaculate, and I trusted my best friend. I had planned the whole thing. I was going to leave him after Christmas. I figured out the finances, and guess what? He served me pace first because he figured out who I was talking to, and he got all the information out of her. I should have just gone to the professionals. That's the way to have done it. And that's what I say, don't always look for pro bono help. Sometimes you're going to need somebody that can help you seriously. But call these organizations and take your children from help. Your children will suffer. So if you think you're doing a favor to your kids by staying in that relationship, you're not. Your child is better off to spend quality time with you and quality time with dad independently, without the both of you bickering and abusing each other. And they need help. So stop being so old-fashioned. Nothing wrong with going to a therapist, guys. They turn out to be your best friends.
You know what? I want to talk about that. You mentioned how it affects the children. Can we talk further about that? Like how does it affect the children?
Varun, I run preschools, and it is terrible. I have seen moms coming in with bruises on their arms, and the kids, and for children, their preschool teacher is their first love. They will tell you, if you tell them what you want to share, they'll tell you, mom had to sleep outside the door, or dad slept on the couch, or mother-in-law did this. They tell you everything. And in the childcare business, we are required to report abuse if there's anything that's happened. Children are affected, and it affects them mentally, and they become sad. I mean, we think children don't hear, they hear everything. Right. They feel everything, they sense everything. Even now with the coronavirus, I tell parents, we had a chat this afternoon about the schools. Whatever you're saying, somebody dying, the media showing all this news, the children are getting depressed. Why do we think our kids don't get depressed? They do get depressed. And so be sensitive to that. Make sure your child knows that they're loved. And if you do decide to separate, don't use them as a negotiating tool. That is the worst thing possible. And I'm guilty of that. Because when you get so desperate, that's what you do, right? And what do? Then you question your kids. The kids go over there, when they come back, you say, what was this dad on the phone with anyone? Was that woman there? And then your kids become your little detectives. Then they go back and forth passing messages. That's, afterwards I stepped back and I said, what was I doing? Why was I even doing that? They have the right, those children have the right to both parents. So don't try and take kids away from mom or kids away from dad, because you're going to make them suffer, and they're going to grow up repeating what you don't want them to do. Now, I don't know the whole psychology behind that, but as an educator, I do know that your parents are the first educators for their children, and the child will mimic one of the parents in the house. And, I've had so many parents come to me and say, I wonder where he gets his behavior from. And I'm so tempted to say you, because really, they are mirror imaging their dad. You know, and one example I'll definitely say, us, especially as Punjabis, we have this thing about we want to raise our men to be macho. Please get over that macho-ness, because there's nothing macho about giving somebody a thappar. There really is, of, you know, kicking them in the ass and doing all that stuff. There is nothing macho about that. Why can't we just raise decent men who are going to love and respect their women?
I agree. Sonal.
I want to, thanks, Varun. A couple of things and great points. One thing that I want to touch upon specifically for women's abuse is that we see a lot of times, especially in our culture, that the mother-in-law, who's also a woman, is supporting the son. So actually a woman is a woman's enemy. Where you can be best friends, actually, you end up being best enemies. And so usually we say this, although we say it loosely, but we say a woman is a woman's worst enemy. And this is exactly the reason, because in our culture, we see that. But having said that, what the community can do, Varun, to your question, I really, really want to appeal to the community to say that be empathic, trust when somebody says they're in trouble. One other thing is we very easily, and especially in the US, we say, oh, we don't want to get involved. Please, let's be quiet. You know, humko kya hai? You know, what's happening in their house, it's their bloody business. No, it's not their business. It's your business too. If somebody, just as much as tolerating abuse is wrong, so is watching it and not doing anything about it is equally criminal. So please, as a community, come together. You know, give up this nonsense about, you know, we're not interfering. We have families, that's another thing, you know, because we've grown up in a culture where we believe that we don't want to wash dirty linen in public. So we don't talk of our troubles. You know, going to a therapist is like, you know, are you mad? Pagal ho kya? There's still that stigma. Don't. If you are, and let me tell you about the children will be far healthier if the abusing dyad, which is the couple, separates. For children, it's better to live under two separate households, healthy, rather than living under the same roof, which is full of abuse. You know, it's almost, so many of my clients, the way they deal with it is, and it's almost become, I have teens who say, oh, mama ka room to niche hai, dad to upar sote hain. It's becoming a norm. Guys, you are passing that legacy to your children. If you have to fight, if you have to argue like two decent human beings, go to a therapist, go to a professional, sort yourselves out. But don't do it in front of your kids, number one. Definitely not. Number two, this whole barrage of, you know, you sleeping on top and you sleeping in the next room and all, the children think it's normal. So what you are basically communicating to them is that it's okay for a couple to sleep in two separate rooms. No, it's not okay, because even though you may not be yelling, but sometimes there's a lot of silent treatment that goes on in our culture, you know, because we don't want to yell, we grow up, you know, typically women are the ones who are more often than not, you know, who have a high pitch, high volume. So they'll be yelling and screaming and ye mat karo, wo mat karo, asu kare che. And the father will be in the background, not really saying things, you know, will be the silent guy. But you are as responsible for it, you know. So many times our kids, you see, they will start giving silent treatment. So also watch out when your child agrees to everything. You know, that's a people pleasing. That's another cue. When a child says yes to everything, you know, say, oh, I've got such a good kid. That kid will never say no, will always say yes. Why will the kid always say yes? Because that kid is petrified, doesn't want to rock the boat. So again, that's a cue. Please do not bring up your children as people pleasers. That's the last thing. At the same time, I'm not saying teach them how to insult people. I'm not saying teach them to be hurtful, but at the same time, let them also be engaged. When you constantly have a partner or you have a child who's saying yes to everything, that leads to disengagement. See, that's what also happens to children. The impact on children is many a times the children, they go in a can. They shut down. So, you know, there are three kinds of responses: fight, flight, and freeze. More often than not in our culture, we will see that we freeze, you know, and very often it's the men who will freeze. You know, even if there is a mother who's dominating in the house and the mother is yelling and all that, it's the men who freeze and who can up. And then they will say yes to everything. The slightest slightest move of, danger that they smell, they will completely can out. So that's frozen. So make sure that you're aware or you're conscious of those cues. If your child is, don't be very proud and don't feel very virtuous that your child said, oh, your child is saying yes to it. My child never says no. You say anything to my child, I'm the sweetest child, never says no. Oh, please don't. That's not a virtue. Let your child learn how to say no nicely. Yes, communication, how you communicate is equally important. We can do lessons on that. But the point is that communicate well. Not what you say, but how you say also is important. So I'm not advocating being rude. One other point that I definitely want to make is, there is a gentleman who obviously has had a heartburn and has a question, that there are women perpetrators also. Oh, for sure they are. And I started this, that was my disclaimer, that we're talking of women abuse, and that's why we're focusing on that. And Varun, you will need to do a panel, or you will need to do on men's abuse, especially in our culture. And I will make sure that you have a lot of audience for that, because sure, a lot of times in our culture, because the women are the ones who talk, and right now, I'm sure when I go home, my husband's going to say, you were the one talking the most.
I think your husband's listening I think he's on the show.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, he's a sweetheart. But yeah, so my point is, I was just trying to be a little funny. But my point is that because women talk a lot in our culture, or at least that's what you see more often than not, we end up getting the brunt of it. Because, but very often what happens is, it's the man who has the remote control. And I want everybody to be careful of that. What is the job of a remote control? What does a remote control do? What do you do when you have the remote control in your hand? You press fast forward on your screen, you'll see a fast forward movement. You press rewind, you'll see rewind. You say pause, it'll pause, And so that's what happens. Don't give your remote control to anyone, including your spouse. And I'm appealing to all the spouses out there. Okay, to talk and be loving. You can, again, taking for granted and being taken for granted in a relationship is a very gray area, especially in intimate relationships. We all take each other for granted. Right. So as long as there are those healthy boundaries, that's fine, and it's required. I don't want my husband checking on me every minute to say, can I, are you free this Sunday? Can we go? I should hope that he would know in advance, because we're talking to each other. He shouldn't have to check to me. But so he can take an appointment for me. He can plan something, right, even though he's not completely checked with me, which is fine. So those areas are okay. But my point is about the remote control, that don't give your remote control. Be very, very conscious about it and teach your children. So women, yes, in the Q&A, the gentleman has said that, it's the women who destroy. I agree, the Sasuji. I have a client right now where, because the mother-in-law said, the daughter-in-law went and had a child. And to Renu's point, children, bachcha kar lo, sab theek ho jayega. Her husband sleeping around with somebody else for the last 18 years. But the Sas went and advocated and said, don't worry, beta, all this will be fine once you have a child. Now that poor child is screwed, because now you have to deal with another layer. And now this woman is obviously fighting in court for divorce and custody battle. So now you have one other layer. So please don't be in a hurry to have children when you are in an abusive relationship. When you try and go back, that's another thing that I see a lot in my cases, where people are like, should I give him one chance, please, And I said, are you ready to get pregnant again? Because if he's calling you back on your knees, but I have already installed this and I've already this and all. No, nothing is going to work. You will definitely get pregnant. You go back the second time or the first time. So what I'm saying is, these are tactics. These are manipulations. They will say all these things. So I don't know. I think I kind of, unfortunately, I kind of went into a loop, because I answered 2-3 questions from what was going on in the,
That's perfectly cool.
You requested me at the beginning of the show to talk about going back. So I'm going to address that for you.
Yeah, please do. Absolutely. That what happens when you go back, the domestic violence cycle. Yeah. Renu,
if you stick around and you live in hope that somebody's going to change, and even when you go for change, even when you go to a therapist, change doesn't happen overnight. So ladies, don't go and expect that he's going to change by Monday morning and he's going to be wonderful. Change doesn't happen overnight. And even for people who have serious alcoholic problems, they have to go for years for help. So if you're going to stick around, then be prepared to take the brunt of it. And my question is always, if it was not an abusive relationship, but you're just not happy with habits can be changed. But when it comes up to abuse and control, it can't. And the second thing is going back for what? I never can figure out why anybody wants to stay or go back. Now, I didn't leave for 4.5 years because I had nowhere to go. I had no green card. I had no money. I had no family. And finally, I pulled up the courage and I was put on the street with 2 kids. And guess what, friends? We're here today, surviving, independent. I cannot tell you the feeling of having your own credit card and swiping it and making your own decisions and not having somebody question you. That independence is wonderful. And I've remarried. No male bashing here. I have remarried and there is hope. But if I had gone back, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I would not be sitting here today. And what I can tell you is, over the 30 years, I took all the steps to self-improve, self-heal with my children, whereas my ex-husband continued on his same habits, womanizer, lots of money, whatever. God bless him, he died a miserable man. He died a miserable man. He had no family, nobody around him. I don't have probably 1/10 of the amount of money he had when he died, but I had the happiness and the children. So go back for what? Had I gone back, I wouldn't be sitting here today. What I can tell you is there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light at the end of the tunnel doesn't always have to include a husband or a partner. You can do it on your own. And along that journey, if you find a second or third or fourth chance, why not? I lucked out. I got a great guy. But what I did do is I put a list and I went for the complete opposite of what I was initially married to. So guys, don't repeat the same. If you like Amitabh Bachchan, don't marry Amitabh Bachchan again, because we tend to go for the same habits. You'll notice that if your first husband was an alcoholic, you have a tendency of attracting those kind of people. So make a list and go for somebody with a complete opposite personality, and you will find peace and you will find love and you will find happiness. There is light at the end of the tunnel. So you don't need to go back. You need to look forward. Right. And in the book that I wrote, you mentioned, Sonal, about, I lost my train of thought. There was something in the that you mentioned that I completely written in my book about moving forward and being resilient, and about the mother-in-law. Mother-in-laws play a big part, of course, in ruining relationships, but that's if you allow them to do it. That's if you allow them to do it. So you know what? That's where you need to take control. And yes, there was a remote control. What I wrote in my book, in my story, was that one thing you never share in your life is the secret code to your heart. You keep that within yourself. You never let anybody know your weaknesses. You never let them know your weaknesses, because once they have your weaknesses in your hand with that remote control, they'll play those weaknesses. You keep that locked to yourself, only for yourself, and you work on yourself.
Wow.
Varun.
Yes.
I'm just reading. I want to address something very clearly over here, that Renu has moved on and she's done a terrific job. But I want to reach out to every woman who's going through whatever it is that you're going through. Let me tell you something. It is not easy. It is very difficult. So I don't want people to think that, Renu could do it and I couldn't do it. And because Renu is very strong and Renu had these extraordinary circumstances, and that's why she was able to move on and all that. It's very, very difficult. One other thing is that instead of expecting the other person to constantly change, look into yourself. Go seek help, go to a therapist. And again, a disclaimer, I'm not saying this because I'm a therapist, but more often than not, when you discover things about yourself, when you gather that strength, you will know what is right for you. And even if this whole thought about going back, I say this to one of my clients right now, is that if you want to go back to your husband who's already beaten you blue, I said, tell him to take the 52-week anger management course. Let's see what his response is. Because the courts over here, they mandate, they do a 52-week batterers program for 52 weeks. And so I said, tell your husband that you take the 52 weeks anger management course, and I am going to seek help for myself because I also want to know what's going on. So I'm not passing the entire blame onto just the abuser. But very often what happens is that when women get victimized, they shut down, and it's very difficult. But just a ray of hope is, go talk to somebody. Find out what's going on inside you. Find out why you stayed. Each one of you has a unique reason to stay, and nobody, goddammit, nobody in this world has a right to pull you down. Each one of you are terrific, and each one of you have your reasons. why you have stayed back. If you stayed back for your children, that's because of the love of because of that motherhood in you. You stayed back because you were hopeful. You didn't want to break a family. That's why you stayed back. But unfortunately, you didn't realize, obviously, things were not in your control. So you stayed back. So then you're giving your child that kind of an environment. So think like that. What is the legacy you want to leave for your children? So please, 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 all my super women over there, please, and men, do not think that this is easy and it's not a cakewalk. Thank you.
So, Renuji, I know you had a bad experience with a family member or a friend who didn't really help you out, but divulged all of the kind of your secrets, your plan. What can an ally, a family member, or a friend do if they know someone who experienced domestic violence?
First is listen, and with privacy, and respect the person's privacy. Second, don't be judgmental, and don't give bad advice. Sometimes it's best to just listen. That's it. Just listen. And if you are going to give advice, then make sure you direct the person to the right help. And we have resources. When I was going through it, there were very limited resources. I'm not even sure which organizations were around at the time, and I was reliant on Yellow Pages. So, it didn't have Google at the time either, and I was reliant on listening to people. I mean, even when I found out I was pregnant with my first child, he would not take me to a doctor. I actually was at a party, and I was already 8 weeks pregnant when I overheard the name of an Indian lady doctor, looked her up in the Yellow Pages, and I walked to her office, and that's how I managed to keep my pregnancy. There was nobody in that room that I felt I could trust even to talk. So if you do have somebody that comes to you for help, listen to them, and then respect their privacy. Don't make it a gossip issue. Don't start talking about it and make it the talk of the town. And then guide them to the right place if you can, or just be a listening voice. Sometimes people just need a listening voice. And as Sonal said, it wasn't easy for me. I mean, don't even get me wrong. I'm not the strongest person out there. I have had my moments. But the one advice I will give is, you have the fear of the unknown is there, but you have to pull up the courage to live every day. And I would rather eat 2 less rotis a day, but have the dignity to come home and know that somebody's not going to disrespect me. I'd rather that. Now, that was the choice I made. And it's been a very hard journey, a very tough journey, but you got to do it. And I do these, people ask me, why do you go open about it? Like I said, this is self-therapy for me. The more I talk, the better I feel for myself. And I want my children to listen. And I want other women to listen, to understand that, no, it's not easy. It took me a lot of courage to decide to get married again. I had a lot of second doubts. But then I said to myself, do I really want to be alone? And I didn't want to live the rest of my life alone. And also I wanted a good father for my children. The biological father was not the role model. And I could not play mother and father. I needed, in this country, especially with no grandparents around, I needed that support. But, there is hope. And you have to first find out your own faults. It's very easy to point the finger at someone else. So that's why I say, I don't believe in playing victim, because I'm responsible for everything that happened to me. I could have stopped it from day one, and I didn't, because I made those decisions to stick around for all the reasons, whatever. But at least I left early enough to be able to start my life again and to move on. It's people, when you wait 30, 35 years, that's a tough one to do. That's a tough one to do. So if you're going to do early intervention is the way to do it. And then again, I repeat this, get professional help. There are experts out there that can do it, attorneys out there, organizations like Narika, people like Sonal, they are there. And then when you start making a difference in your life, offer the help to other people. There's so many people out there that need help, offer it to them. And to all the young women that are listening to this show, please get over this whole, romance thing. The romance it'll be there for you. You can have a very romantic marriage for 60 years if you find the right person. So quit watching Bollywood movies and that silly show that comes on Netflix right now.
Like you said, regardless of the route you take, you're going to have a tough, it's going to be a tough journey, right? It's going to be a difficult journey.
Life is a compromise every day.
Or you go through, pulling yourself out of that abuse. But I want to ask Bindu the same question about what advice can you give a ally?
You asked me the question?
No, Bindu.
Oh, Bindu, yeah, that's what I said.
I think she's frozen.
Is Bindu frozen?
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I think I'm back.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is. Hey. Yeah, so Bindu, what can an ally or a family member or friend do if someone has experienced domestic violence?
Yeah, I'd echo everything Renu said. I think starting by listening, starting with believing, to listen without the intention to respond, to listen without the intention to problem solve. Right. A lot of the people that will listen will immediately jump into solutions. And we've seen a lot of our clients say, both solutions were confusing for them. When their friend said, pack up, let's go today. So most of our clients are, wait, I'm not ready. I haven't decided that. Or if you tell them, no, you have to stay, have another baby, put on lipstick, it'll be fine. Both responses, right? So really to listen and be like, what does that person want? How do I empower that person to figure out for themselves what they want? It goes back to, again, things I said before of sometimes, like I remember this one instance where at some point we asked a client, tell us what your favorite chocolate is. We want to buy it for you. And she actually looked and was it took her a couple of minutes to remember what her favorite candy was from her childhood. And she actually looked and said, no one's ever asked me that in a long, long time. She's never done anything for herself in the longest time. And so really to go back into listening, believing, the most disruptive thing, and Renu has said this so well, is the most disruptive thing you can do is answer with, what did you do? Were you wrong? Did you not feed him when he came back? Like, what have you been doing wrong? And really just to ignore and start with listening, believing, and accepting and empowering that person to make the choices that make sense for them, because there is no right answer. Some people will choose to stay, some people will choose to leave, and it's their decisions to make and it's their lives to lead. I would say other than that, find creative ways to stay in touch. We are all people that instinctively think about ourselves and our homes and our lives, but really when you know somebody else's story and you are they have disclosed, understand the courage that it took someone to tell you that story, and depending on how you respond, they may take another 20 years before they say another thing to somebody else. So acknowledge and respect that, with really trying to find creative ways to stay in touch. And especially in COVID-19, it's so difficult. So, simple things we recommend are say, hey, can we get on a phone call every couple of days? Let our children play. Let's find ways to stay in touch with this person just to make sure that they're okay. And if they seem overly anxious and fearful, we need to kind of stay in touch with them. Other than that, I think support them no matter what they decide, no matter what their choice is, really support them through that process. Offer to support in whatever ways they want. Sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I'll make a meal and bring it over. I'll do something. Really, there does not have to be traditional responses to hearing a disclosure of domestic violence. You can always support them the way they want to be supported. And I think all these things play a role. Really bring, if you can, to Renu's point, if you can help them find a resource, a professional that can support them through the journey, there's nothing like it. And many times we have allies who will call us because the person that's experiencing harm is not ready to do it. And so a friend or a sibling or a daughter of someone being abused will call us, and that's fine. That's a perfect thing to do as a friend. Call an expert and ask them, hey, what can I do to be a better friend? And we'll be happy to support you with things like how you can safety plan for this person just to make sure that they stay alive in their relationship and stay okay. So there's a lot you can do, but I would start with learn a lot about it, listen, empathize, all the things that make us great humans, just stuff that we need to remember in our shared humanity with others.
So there's a kind of question on that is, how do you inform friends that you're only looking for a listening ear and not a problem solver? That's a follow-up question.
I think it should not be friend. Sorry, I think it should be friend.
Friend.
Maybe start with singular first. I think you need to pick somebody that you really trust. And I always say, if you can count your best friends on one hand, you've lucked out. It's hard to find people you can trust. And they are acquaintances, and then they're really, that's your soul sister, and it could be a man. I mean, it doesn't have to be a woman. My best friend during my support system turned out to be a young man who actually, and a lot of people misunderstood and say, oh, you're starting to date a young man. No, he actually used to listen to me and just listen. And it was great that he gave me very good advice from a man's point of view. And of course, I used him to make the ex jealous every now and then, purposely. That played really well. Real psychology, you know. Every now and then a little game works okay, guys. I think a friend, and choose your friends wisely. And also, after, when you're going through something like this, make sure that you're not just all about yourself. I go back to the children. Your children need the help. And you need to make sure you are a support system for them. So choose your friends wisely, and choose friends who are not going to be judgmental of you and your children. Because it was unfortunate. My kids grew up always hearing, oh, your parents are divorced. Where's your dad? That's not your dad. Who is that? And, you know, that's a rough thing to go through. And even when they get invited to parties at the age of 5, they had a calendar to figure out whether they could even make it at the party because the weekend fell on dad's weekend. And naturally, because of our bitter battles, dad was not going to let her go to her mom's friend's birthday party. We need to drop all that drama. We need to we need to remember our children did not come into this world of their choice. We brought them in this world. They should be not part of this whole equation. We need to keep them separate. And Indians love drama, right? We just love the drama. We thrive on drama. That's why the serials are like nonstop. And that's why my life has stopped without these serials these days. But we need to leave the drama out of our relationships. And sometimes we need to learn from the mainstream. The mainstream are very sensible. I see how the mainstream interact when they come and pick up their children. And the parents will meet respectfully in the lobby and talk, and you'll never know that that was the ex-husband. And then when it's an Indian family, the doors will slam, and the gali under the breath, and the kids already are scared about going home because the questioning starts at the door. We need to leave the kids out of the drama.
And we have yes, go ahead, Sana.
Yeah, I just as a take from that, and there are 2 points that I want to address in terms of how do you tell a friend that you just want to listen. The point of communication. One other thing about us Indians is we don't learn how to communicate directly. You don't learn how to say what you want directly. For us, using an I is considered very egoistic. So please don't use I. That's how we grew up. But the point is that when you are especially living in this country and you see around you that there is something called direct communication. So say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't go round and round and round. My husband would completely get lost and he would never understand between the lines at all. And I'd be beating my head up to say, what is this? Why aren't you understand? He said, but you never said it. And I said, you didn't understand? So we grew up like that. So what I'm saying is, and that's something that I've had to learn. So ask for what you want. Please use I. There's a question, and I don't want to obviously identify the person because they've requested not to, but they say, especially in times of COVID, what happens if you all are living under the same roof and it's physically and emotionally controlling the family is and all that? How do you, if you still love and respect your in-laws and parents and whoever it is that you're staying with? First of all, if it's physical violence, then I would rush for the door. Your safety matters. Okay, so please, 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 if it's physical violence and there is a danger, please inform somebody. Emotional violence and all, yes, you are absolutely right. COVID has totally accentuated and increased and enhanced all those chances. My DV cases have gone off the roof. I'm getting calls from everywhere saying, because you're locked in the same house. So what do? Once again, when you communicate, most of the times when we talk and we don't like a certain behavior, we turn around and say, hey, don't do that. That was not right. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I think what happens is when you use that in communication, when you start saying anything unpleasant or negative with a you, the person shuts down. It comes across as attack. You shouldn't have done it. Why did you do this? So my simple solution for that is start with saying how it impacted you and say, hey, I was really, really, saddened by your comment. I really felt belittled. I felt devalued. What does that do? This is to a sensible person. What does that do? You are communicating the impact that it had on you. You're not accusing the person. You're merely saying, look, this is how it's affecting me, in parenthesis, damn it, but don't say it. So this is how I feel. We don't learn that growing up. We don't learn how to talk about our feelings. And more so, all the great men in this community, they definitely don't learn. And the moment you talk of feelings, I know half the men will exit right now if I start talking about feelings, because it's a no-no. You can't talk. Men cannot talk feelings, because what is this nonsense about feelings and all? Please don't, don't get me, and you're a psychologist, so you will go round and round in this. So not like that. But please start anything unpleasant. Start with an I. Say, I feel this. I was really bombed, or I felt, as if you completely butchered me. I was totally hurt. So the impact, if it's something that is complimentary, start with a you. You were awesome. You did a super job. You were a rock star. You are a rock star. But if it's negative, I. And this is across board. It's just a basic rule of communication. So like I said, on communication is one of my other favorite topics, because we don't know how to talk, genuinely. We will be excellent people at the organization. The moment we come home, just like we remove our shoes, we'll remove all the good communication and leave it at the doorstep. The moment we walk in, and then I've heard people say, so now to talk to you, I have to look at a script. No, you don't have to look at a script, but can you at least be nice? Can you at least be kind? Why is it that we think talking to each other, these traits and these virtues are not required? They are required. You will only talk nicely to your boss, and you will talk bad, or you will talk down on your husband or your wife. Is that how it is? But that's what I'm saying. We learn like that. So we have to learn how to talk well. So to your point on how, and I hope I've answered that, the person who said in COVID times, that please reach out for help. It's physical violence, because I don't want at the end of the session, or we don't want to hear catastrophic stories. I'd rather that you went and you reached out for help if it's physical. Emotional, again, I think talk to a professional. I can't give much inputs on this forum. Thank you.
So Bindu, so the question was, what advice can you give to adults who grew up in a physically and emotionally violent household with a high level of control, who are unfortunately staying in the household again amidst COVID and still value their parents, but need a way to cope with all the fights and arguments?
So I think I'm understanding that during COVID-19, they're stuck with right. The person that's causing harm. Yeah, I would say, if you can again, try and confirm if your phones are tapped, and if it isn't tapped, it is helpful that you make an excuse to maybe get out of the house and call a domestic violence agency if you can. It's probably the best thing you can do. Take a minute. Narika has a toll-free number that's on our website, and I'm sure Varun will share that later. And a local domestic violence nonprofit is always your best bet, because they will be the closest to you and can support you with local resources. But that's what I would recommend. Make a phone call. Consider for yourself what it is you want to do. It's an important piece to think through. And of course, many times people don't necessarily have the answers. They know what's going on, but they don't know what they want to do about it. So maybe thinking about that as well is important. Do you want, many of our clients have reached out and said, hey, I need an emergency shelter for the next couple of days. By the way, this plays into many of our stereotypes, where our immigrant and South Asian communities are horrified by the idea of being in a shelter, of being undocumented, of being homeless. And these are, again, value systems that we've grown up with, that, oh, I would rather be abused than be homeless. So I think it's just important to make your peace with, okay, if I want to separate and be safe, is there a friend's home at which you can stay? Is there a hotel that we can support you with, etc.? And so, yes, I think reach out for help as much as you can. If you can't reach out professionally, try to talk to a neighbor or a friend. Sometimes those help as well, where maybe you can have an interaction with a neighbor in downstairs. Just try to reach out for help. And if the person you reach out to does not respond favorably, continue to reach out. Ask the next person. You may not hear it's so extremely difficult to continue to ask somebody else. But if that person responds in a way that sucks, like that, just move on, find the next person and ask the next person, hey, I need support. How can I receive support? And talk till you find the person that will believe and trust you and support you through the journey of what it is you need to do. But we've definitely, as an organization, seen a 3-time increase in just like domestic violence instances happening during COVID-19, and it's really impacted to a very, very high level. Financial stressors are playing into why a lot more physical violence and other forms of violence are happening. So it is real, and it's continuing to really exponentially increase. So it's just important that all of us, really, anyone experiencing this, is thinking about a safety plan. Pack a bag if you have to, know where your documents are, maybe put a bag in your friend's home. Just do these simple things, and you may never need it. You may never use that bag, but hey, it's better that you have that bag. Or if you don't have a bag, that's fine. There are organizations that will pack bags and give you bags that you need if you walk out of your home. So do what makes sense for you from a safety perspective and a wellness perspective, and reach out for support as often as you can. And you don't have to do it alone. Everyone who's experiencing something like this, we're all worthy of better, and we all don't need to do this alone. Even if you don't have family and friends that cannot support you, find an organization that'll support you and stick with them and move through it. So yeah, that's what I recommend.
So Renergy, you briefly mentioned about when you walked out, you had society responded in a particular way.
Society was terrible.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that. How do family, friends, society, how did they respond when you left your abusive relationship?
So in actual fact, when my ex-husband gave me divorce papers, and my mom wanted to hide it from everybody, and naturally, like anything else, she didn't want the world to know because she hoped I would go back. And then when reality hit and she realized that, no, this is not happening. Actually, I had to send my mom back home. I told her, she was here, God bless her, for 4 months helping me. But her advice was always, hi, wapas chale jao, make another baby, this and that. Showing the babies, he'll change his mind. Finally, I said, Mom, go back. Let me deal with my divorce. Come back when it's all done. And that's how I got my strength, because she was trying to do it her own way, right? Mm-hmm. I think in my case, many years ago, especially here in Fremont, there was no support. Friends were very few. I probably had like 3 friends that I relied on. So I had to rebuild a completely new social circle, because the social circle I had was connected with the ex-husband, because it was all related to our business. And naturally, everybody chose him. He was more wealthy. He had everything else. And of course, it was nothing wrong with him cheating, because all men are meant to cheat and the woman is meant to accept. So that was the last call for me. The society was most unforgiving. In actual fact, I went through some pretty traumatic times. There were some organizations here that were meant to be Indian cultural organizations, where I would actually buy tickets to events, and I would be placed to sit on a table alone. And I would be told, because they don't want a divorced woman on their table. And it was always because other women, that their husband may look at you. So I think, I can't remember, it was Kalpana or Sonal who said that a woman is actually a woman's worst enemy. And it's true. That's why I ended up having male friends who helped me go through my divorce and give me my confidence back, versus women who always try to tear me down. And that was many years ago, and I still haven't seen that change too much. I've noticed that if your spouse dies, then people will feel sympathy for you. But if you go through a divorce or you're abused, it's always your fault. And it always tends to be the woman's fault. And I always used to hear, you must have done something, or you didn't give him what he needed. That's why he went with the secretary, because you didn't give him what he needed. Why was it never, maybe it's both our faults, so maybe something had gone wrong. Why was it always me? And that always came up. And then when I was raising my 2 children, I'll share with you, I opened a matrimonial agency, which ended up being the best therapeutic medicine I ever did for myself. I did that for 4 years, and I specialized only in divorced people, because even your regular matrimonial agencies didn't want to deal with divorced people. It was shocking. Yeah. So I did that, and there's nothing wrong with being divorced. I don't know why people have the stigma. If you tell them you're divorced, they'll be like, oh. But if you tell them I'm widowed, oh, I'm so sorry for you. But divorce always gets, oh. And if it's a woman divorced, then immediately within seconds, the gossip starts. I wonder what happened. And I used to get this all the time, you know. And he could loaf around as much as he wanted. But when I went on my first date, it became the talk of the town. Why? I'm human. I have my needs too, you know, and needs, everything is, unfortunately, in our Indian community, we connect a relationship of a man and woman immediately to physical needs. People don't realize sometimes you just go out for some emotional support or a little hug. And why do I need to label my relationships? Why do I need to tie Rakhi on somebody to say, oh, I'm safe with him? Why? That Rakhi means crap, because they don't even pull through on that Rakhi. I mean, none of my Rakhi brothers came through for me. So, so I've given up that celebration as well. What my point is that society needs to, our Indian community needs to learn to communicate, as Sonal said, and they need to stop trying to be God. Stop trying to judge, learn to be forgiving. And also, I will tell you, a lot of people ask me, you know, why did you go to your ex-husband's deathbed when he was dying? Why did you participate in his funeral? Because you know why? I'm not God, I'm human. And it's okay to forgive and let go. Let go. That song, let it go, let it go. You know what? Leave it behind and let it go. I'm not saying repeat the mistake. I'm saying let it go. Otherwise, you carry that burden all your life. And so I'm not strong, friends. By no means am I strong. I let go of the garbage. I never repeat my mistakes. If I find anybody negative, I just say out of my way. I don't want negativity in my life. I don't want garbage in my life. I don't want gossipers in my life. I want to have a purpose. And every morning I wake up with a purpose, whether it's to spend the day with my grandkids or to teach a child, whatever it is. I want positive people around me. I don't want people to judge me, because I can make my own judgments about myself. And so I think if anything, anyone's listening out there, learn to be forgiving. Please, we're all human. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Just let's learn to just be forgiving and move on.
So we have a few more minutes left. So I'm going to kind of start with some closing, any last tips, any last advice. So Sonal, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, and thank you, Varun. 2 points. One is for everyone, divorce doesn't really define you, and getting a divorce doesn't mean a failed life. A lot of times people take divorce as personal failures. It was my fault. It isn't. Please, it isn't. There are lots of factors that go into it. The second is, and this is talking about why victims don't easily leave. A lot of us have this whole sense of abandonment. So remember when I was talking about the mother-in-law who is like, you know, all over like a monster? That mother-in-law inside is petrified. There is a lot of fear inside. She doesn't want to get abandoned by her son. So she ends up supporting. And many times we don't realize this. So there is a sense of abandonment is a huge one. So as parents, please be cognizant when you play favorites with children. The child who had less attention will end up getting hold of a partner who's going to give all the charming attention and end up being an abuser. And that child is not going to be able to recognize that. So what I'm saying is, you know, one quick line is, Sadhguru has said this, that the only place where gender matters is the bathroom and the bedroom. These are the only place where a man and a woman difference matters. Other than that, in this day and age of technology, whether you're a man or a woman, girl or a boy does not matter. So let's talk in terms of children. Let's not talk anymore about girl child and a boy child. Raise them up just as children, not as, of course, you know, there are strengths that each one of us have. And, you know, men and women are complementary. We are not competitors. Why the hell are we comparing men and women? Both have their strengths. So let's just capitalize on that strength and live together in harmony. You know, animals and insects live in harmony. Plants live in harmony. It's we stupid humans that don't live in harmony. So please, let's live in harmony. Thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work. I agree with that.
Totally, totally.
So Bindu, any last tips, any advice you want to give?
Yeah, I think last tips are, I would say if you, of course, if you are experiencing domestic violence, reach out for support. Please reach out to Narika, reach out to a local domestic violence agency. We're here and able to support you. Our website is www.narika.org. Our email address is narika@narika.org. Varun, I'm sure you'll share more information in the post as well. If you are in a position where COVID-19 hasn't impacted you financially, understand you are in the 1%, understand that your inaction is not cool anymore. And so I would say, please consider making a donation to Narika, to a local domestic violence agency. Put your money where your mouth is and just do it. Make a donation that hurts. Don't make a donation that's convenient. Make a donation that kind of hurt you a little, because it's worth it. It's worth it to support someone if you're in a good place. So please consider that. Volunteer your time and your expertise, no matter who you are, whether you are a marketing person, whether you are a legal consultant, whether you do whatever you do, whether you work in training, there is a place for you in the movement to end violence against women. And we can help you find your place there. That's what we're great at. We can support you with how you find your place in this movement. But really, inaction is not an option anymore. We've seen such an exponential increase in this kind of issues that we're not going to, none of this is going to change for ourselves, for our children, for our families, if we don't do something about it, and if all of us don't do something about it. So please consider doing that. Consider really volunteering, donating, and so on. And the last thing I'll say is just really back to control, really to look in the mirror, understand how we play a role in this problem. We've seen instances where when parents have told their boys that they cannot be gay and cannot have a homosexual relationship, that they will then go on to marry women who they will then abuse, and then they get divorced, and then they marry another person, and then they abuse them again. And really, when you look right back to the beginning of how repression and control by parents in this instance led to this pathway. So really just think about the control and power we have and how that plays a role. But yeah, other than that, be kind to yourself. As when Renu was talking about forgiving, I think the best thing we can do is to forgive ourselves. We are probably better at forgiving others and not as good as forgiving ourselves, but really to treat ourselves with the same love and forgiveness that we possibly give other people or strangers is probably the best thing we all can do right now. And so be kind to yourself as a start, I would say.
Renuji, any last tips, any last advice?
Love yourself. I say love yourself. Spread your wings and fly. And you don't need to have live in somebody else's nest. Make your own nest. And again, I'm not a man basher, but I really believe that it's time that women develop and learn that they have their own independence. And our life is not just focused on being married and having children. You can do all of that stuff, and you can have kids without the man too. So whatever you do, first love yourself, respect yourself. And if you're not happy, move on, guys, move on, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And all I say is be happy. You live once, just be happy.
Yes, I completely agree. Be happy. You only live once, and take the action, make it happen, because this is the only life.
Sure. So, if anyone wants to reach out to me, find me on Facebook. Always happy to talk. I'm not one of those who's going to spread news. Got no time for it.
Yeah.
And Varun, feel free to give any of our contacts to people.
Yes. So I'm gonna send out the contact information. I'm gonna send out your Facebook information to everybody, Narika's information to everybody. I'm gonna upload this video on YouTube, send that information out in that same email to all the attendees. If any of the attendees have any more questions, have any comments about these conversations and how we can improve and do a better job, please do send me your comments. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists, Bindu, Renu, Sonal, and Kalpana, for sharing your stories and for engaging in this discussion about women's abuse. It's a very important topic, and I'm so glad that all of us here could make a difference in someone else's life. I want to thank our sponsor, Nita Naturals. And lastly, I just want to make a quick announcement that our next conversation is going to be on August 6th, 2 weeks from now, from 5 to 7 p.m. on Mick Mindfulness. It's like McDonald's, Mick Mindfulness, which means it's when the mindfulness is used intentionally or unwittingly for self-serving purposes or for ego-enhancing purposes, that run counter to what is being taught in Buddhism of letting go of attachment and having compassion for everybody. So that's our next topic. I want to thank everybody. Love and abundance to all. And Thank you,
Varun. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.